Good afternoon. Welcome to the second part of our summit. And it is our great honor and privilege to have two more keynote speakers this afternoon. Professor Geraldine Fitzpatrick and Professor Aristotle Timbus. I will introduce Geraldine, and I am very honored, doubly honored and privileged, because not only as Vice Chair of ACM-W, but also as Chair of the ACM Computer-Human Interaction chapter in Greece, as Geraldine is a figure, how would we say, in human-computer interaction. She was the chair, co-chair of the most recent Computer-Human Interaction conference, which is an immense, not a humongous feat, and I would like to congratulate her again for that. So Geraldine is full professor and head of the Human-Computer Interaction Group at the TU Vienna, Technical University of Vienna. She is an ACM Distinguished Speaker, and she is an ACM Distinguished Scientist. She holds a Bachelor in Information Technology and a PhD in Computer Science and Electrical Engineering from Queensland, University of Queensland in Australia. She is also a trained executive personal coach, group facilitator trainer, and meditation teacher, and brings an evidence-based approach to this work through a master's in applied positive psychology and coaching practice from UEL. So this interdisciplinarity comes in again, and without further ado, I would like to introduce you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. So first of all, we do need to thank the ACM in particular for their support in my travel getting here as part of the Distinguished Speakers program. And I was tempted in this talk to refer to a lot of the things that Maria talked about this morning about, you know, the gender imbalance in computer science and a lot of the biases we face, and I'm sure many of you have experienced them as I have. And I can also talk to you, I can also just point you to this newspaper article that was 28th of May, so very recent, in the Guardian University. And it was a term coined mentrification, if you like that. And even though she's talking about the Beatles and beers, she's also talking about computers in these articles and the fundamental role that women had in the early history of computers, but how it got taken over by men, hence the mentrification. So you may be interested in reading that. But what I wanted to do instead that is something that I think is far more pressing, and that's the challenges that Yanis referred to this morning. With all of these fundamentally, critically important ways in which computers and technologies are shaping society. And we say that as this disembodied computers and technology shaping society stuff out there, but it's you and me, and it's our students, and it's our colleagues, it's people who make these decisions. So, you know, these big challenges that Yanis mentioned about big CS and new frontier CS and responsible CS, we need radically different ways of engaging, as Yanis talked about. So we never talked about our talks, but I think I'm sort of a follow-on and a compliment. So these are really critically important challenges, and many people are trying to respond to them. ACM is developing a new code of ethics, trying to reflect especially the responsible CS. And IEEE is also developing a new code of ethics. There was a workshop held at my university that I unfortunately couldn't attend because I was travelling elsewhere on digital humanism that is also precisely driven by these significant challenges that we're facing right now. And they have what they call the Vienna Manifesto. So you can search for that and you can add your support by signing it. And this talks about things like digital technologies disrupting society, understanding what it means to be human. You know, the manifesto is a call to deliberate and to act on current and future technologies. And it goes on and talks about other things like espousing critical, rational reasoning and interdisciplinarity needed to shape the future, and being connected to human values and needs. And this all sounds wonderful, doesn't it? We have to do this. We have to have interdisciplinarity. We have to connect to human values and needs and make choices that shape a sort of society that we want to live in. But how do we do that practically? And what's the invisible, hidden, human work involved? Has anyone here worked in an interdisciplinary project or a project with other disciplines? On a scale of 1 to 10, how, 1 being easy, 10 hard, how was it? 10, 11. 7. Oh, you're lucky. What?
Even to have the same language.
Even to have the same language is hard. It's hard. As an Australian, I've got to say it's bloody hard. We're allowed to say bloody as Australians. It is hard. And we do a lot of our interdisciplinary, well, I shouldn't put this onto you. I know that a lot of the interdisciplinary projects and work that we've done to date, many of it has been tick box interdisciplinary work. We've needed the different disciplines in order to get the project funding. We've got the project funding, we've delivered on it, but we've not done a good job working together or really learning from each other. We go back into our little bubbles and do our own thing, and we might fling something over a wall every now and then. We did have a recent project where we did take this much more seriously and really tried to do it, and we had deliberate discussions in the beginning of the project about shared values, commitments, ways of working, trying to address the different language. And we did a reflection on ourselves at the end of the project where we interviewed all the project partners, and it was still hard. So these take very different skills. These are great calls. But what skills do we need, and what's the work of actually doing that interdisciplinary value-based work? So I want to try, my sort of basic premise or sort of message here is that, of course we still need good technical skills. For heaven's sake, I don't want to fly in a plane that's going to drop out of the sky. We need good technical skills, but they're only a necessary but not sufficient skill set. And I want to point through this talk to another skill set that reflects a lot of what Yannis talked about as well. And I want to call them our superpowers to deliver, to help us deliver, and what that might mean for practice. I want to start doing this through more of a personal story, or just telling my own story. And as Maria said in the introduction, I'm a bit of a walking interdiscipline, because I also used to be a nurse and a midwife before I did computer science. I know that's an obvious progression. And with mixed degrees, and I've worked in industry as a user experience consultant as well. So, and I've lived in different countries around the world. So I bring a lot of personal experiences to the work that I'm talking about. And within nursing, I got a nursing prize. Within academia, I would be considered very successful by a lot of the measures that we use in academia to judge success. So, H-index and publications and PhD students and so on. And we present ourselves, I present myself. The standard presentation in our bios on our webpage is framed in terms of those sort of outputs. And there's a lot of what we are measuring that people talk about in terms of egg counting, the academic egg counting. And so if you're wanting to, breed like a breed of chickens that all were great egg producers, you might think that you would take someone, like you might call me a super chicken, and you might try to find lots of other super chickens and let them get together, and that's how you'll get more and more academic eggs. And in fact, that's what William Muir did, not with academics, but with real chickens, in the 1990s. And this is a story that's been brought into the management world through Margaret Heffernan and a TED talk that she did, but I think it applies really well here in academia. I just realised I didn't look at the time when I started. Okay, sort me out. So William Muir is an animal biologist, scientist, with a particular interest in breeding and genetics. And he was working with poultry farmers, and his research question was about how to create a brood, what do you call a brood of chickens, whatever they are? Flock, doesn't sound right, does it? A what? A school of chickens, that's good. But yeah, a bunch of chickens. To create a bunch of chickens that were going to be sort of high production egg-laying chickens, because that's where poultry farmers earn their money. So he ran a study that eventually ended up with 2 groups of 9 chickens. One group were the super chickens. They're all the really high egg producing chickens, and the other group were your sort of average chooks that did enough. And that seems to be what academia is doing as well, in a way, isn't it? With our counting of academic eggs, with the way that we select for promotion, with the way that we select for people coming into new positions. We're trying to select into our faculties or into our organisations the super egg producers. But let me tell you what happened to these chickens. So, of the super chickens, at the end of the study, 6 of them had been killed by the other chickens. And the 3 that were left were pecked bare of feathers. And he describes in his and their egg production was way down because they weren't healthy anymore as individuals. And then, of course, because 6 of them had gone, they didn't have a collective lot of eggs either. And he describes the reason for this happening as putting all the super chickens together set up a very individualistic, hyper-competitive, hyper-aggressive environment. A selfish culture. And again, that's interesting because I have a podcast series called Changing Academic Life because I care about some of these issues, and a recent interview was with Moshe Vardi, who's been very active in ACM and in the communications of the ACM. And he was reflecting on the pressures that we're putting on people to produce their academic eggs. And he was talking about how we're breeding people to be selfish. And then we get surprised when we need people to do service because they say no, because they're selfish, because that's exactly what we've created. So it was interesting hearing him reflect on that relative to this study. And what was the other surprise for Muir was that the 9 chickens, who were the averages, were doing brilliantly. They were fat and plump and healthy. Their egg production was up 160%. They got on well together. And he talks about the importance of taking a group unit of analysis, might be some of the language we use, and looking at the social traits, not the individual traits of isolated people. Of course you still need chickens who can lay eggs, which is still need good technical skills. But he actually talks about this group of chickens genetically inheriting tendencies to be kind to other chickens. So the group is better together. And it's not only chickens that have evidence of the importance of being kind to other chickens. We have human research that talks about the importance of being kind to other humans, of having collaborative, constructive, productive working relationships. And there are numerous studies that document all sorts of outcomes that you can see here. I won't read them through in detail, you can see them. But I want to draw attention to, increased productivity and performance. People are going to work better. They're going to be more engaged, more motivated to solve problems. And the big critical one here for me is the creativity. When we're in positive, constructive working relationships, there is research that talks about our brains opening and expanding. We're more likely to come up with more, when we're in a creative problem-solving task, to come up with more ideas and more creative ideas. And with the challenges that we're facing now with technology, where there aren't any clear answers, we want people in this sort of space solving these problems. So, what are the human skills underpinning this sort of these benefits that get there? So, Yanis talked about them in a particular way this morning. I want to frame them as social emotional skills. We've done research on this. One of my recent PhD graduates, Peter Slovak, focused particularly on looking at technology to support social emotional learning, because these are learnable, teachable skills. They're not unique to a gender or a person. So these skills tend to be talked about in terms of skills around yourself, your self-awareness and self-management. So the self-efficacy, self-confidence, adaptability, goal setting, stress management, all of those sort of good self-management skills. They talk about a lot of the skills that are to do with social interactions and relationships. So of course, communication skills, conflict management, collaboration, teamwork, and when we think about interdisciplinarity, perspective taking, appreciating diversity, respect, I think these skills we need to have a lot more development in order to really work out how to work together in interdisciplinary relationships. And then this particular version of social emotional skills also brings in values-based stuff, which connects to responsible decision making. And I like this version because of the way it connects with the responsible computer science agenda that's on now. And this is how we go about engaging with difficult, complex decision making. So the key thing is these are teachable, learnable skills, and they've been recognised in many different areas as important. So the World Economic Forum has a report on the future of jobs, 2016, and they talk about these being the top 10 skills that are needed in 2020. And the skills that are particularly making their way into the 2021 compared to the 2015 report are emotional intelligence and cognitive flexibility. And creativity has jumped from number 10 to number 3. Again, key skills that we need to engage in solving our tough technical problems. Google did an internal project studying what makes their team successful. What are the factors involved? And what they came out with was, just like the super chickens, it's not the who, it's not having your super chickens in the team, it's the how your team members get on. What are the social traits of the team? And how team members interact, structure their work, view their contributions together. And in particular, they talk about psychological safety as the most important factor. And that's about creating an environment where people feel it's safe to step up and make a contribution without fear of being attacked or judged. Even if other people disagree, that the way that people engage, it creates a safe space for people to make their contributions. And if we're going to solve our complex problems where there aren't simple solutions, where we need everyone's perspectives, where we need to navigate and negotiate among different trade-offs, these are the sorts of environments we need to be working in. Google also talks about the important role of the leader in creating this environment, but you'll notice here that with all of the qualities of a great leader, that again I won't read through them, you can skim them, they're not about managing or telling people what to do. They're about empowering and enabling your people to do their best work together, and you're there in a servant support role in doing it. SAP similarly has reports on a big program that they've had that has included a big mindfulness component, but also spends a lot of effort on social emotional skills development, and again, positive benefits. And Microsoft as well has been going through in the last couple of years a sort of a culture shift, and again, moving to this model of empowering people in the organisation, taking the social unit and their take on psychological safety, they're framing it as a growth mindset. That it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay to throw in an idea that ends up not being very good or not taken up because it might lead to other things. You know, prepared to take a risk together, having each other's back. So these are all key aspects of what creates good work environments, good social teams that will produce the best work, as Google found in their study. So what's this got to do with women? Sorry, I keep flicking. Are you getting... so what's this got to do with women? Now, Yana sort of alluded to some stuff this morning, and there are reports that talk about women being naturally better leaders for the 21st century. In this particular report, they use the language of transpersonal leadership. And that's about operating beyond the ego while continually developing and learning. Radical, ethical, authentic, while emotionally intelligent and caring. Building strong collaborative relationships. Creating a performance-enhancing culture that's ethical, caring and sustainable. Enabling and empowering. The group being stronger together. And what they did in this study was they collected data, they run one of those 360-degree feedback tools. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but within organisations, usually once a year, people above and below you and who you work with will fill out a review on you. And that's called a 360. So they have a particular 360 tool. So they were collecting data from, I'm trying to read my notes here, I'll have to go back. They were collecting data from 2006 to 2013. They had 161 people in this from public, private, non-for-profit, 40% women. And they didn't go looking for, this study wasn't about gender. Gender emerged as an interesting finding when they looked across the results that they had. They were looking at one of the ways that they looked at their data was along the criteria of social and emotional skills. And women fared better in 15 of the 19 categories. And you can see some of the top ones there. Again, many of the skills that we need to try to deliver on our complex computer science challenges. And I think it's also interesting what's at the bottom. These are the ones where women were less strong than men. And someone mentioned perfectionism this morning. And I find it interesting that accurate self-assessment and self-confidence are there. And from a lot of the literature that's around on imposter syndrome and around perfectionism, these, I think, are the mechanisms often underpinning where perfectionism and imposter syndrome are coming from. Now, as I've said, all of these skills are actually teachable and learnable. And as both Maria and Yanis said this morning in presenting data, they're just statistics. So it doesn't mean that you don't have some of these skills, or you have something different, or you have a different mix. We are all unique. What it does say for us as individuals is that there will be some things that come more easily to us, and there are other things that don't come so easily, and if we want to develop them, we might have to put in a bit more effort to do it. But they are developable, if that's a word. So, what does this mean? How do we get to be a super flock? I think we need to start with our students who are educating. So two of my wonderful colleagues, Peter Pergethofer and Chris Frauenberger, have just completed or are completing the second year of running this course on ways of thinking. And it's replacing our Basics of HCI course in the first year. And it's trying to, you know, that thing we said we needed before about being more reflective and being able to, you know, the thing that the Digital Human Manifesto about values and understanding all of that and interdisciplinarity. So this is trying to create some awareness in the students from the very beginning that there are different ways of approaching and engaging with a topic, different ways of thinking. And they also have some cross-cutting strengths. There's an article that will be out in Communications of the ACM any day now, and they also now have a very good web page up that will be linked to the article, which provides some more information. I also think we need to add, and this is maybe something I need to offer to the faculty now that Kai's over and I can find a brain again, we should be offering ways of working to complement the ways of thinking. That might pick up some of those very particular social and emotional skills. And I would also love us to think about students having some input from multiple other disciplines. Just so they know how someone coming from philosophy thinks. I have a PhD student at the moment, or a PhD student in our group, who's in a doctoral college around robots and trust, and she's from a philosophy background. And she has a very different way of discussing. I mean, she likes arguing, and she's really rigorous about defining every term she uses, because that's important in philosophy. And she's also working with people from the engineering faculty, and they're finding sort of big culture clashes. So if we could train engineers, computer scientists, that this is how you do philosophy in a way. And I know that Chris and Peter pick up on philosophical thinking in their course, so it's probably not a good example, but the same for psychology or sociology or design or art or whatever it might be. Expose our students to other disciplines so that they can start to see that the world doesn't look like a computer screen and that everything doesn't happen like an algorithm. I think we need to rethink our egg counting in a really big way. It's getting crazy. I was just talking to Aristotle at one of the breaks about the pressures, the increasing pressures on people to publish more and more, to get more eggs. And those eggs often aren't high quality. So how do we value the things that are really going to make a difference in getting us to where we need to go with good technology? How do we in particular value social emotional skills? Because they're not as quantifiable. how do we recognise these? Because they're often regarded as just women's skills, or just not important. They don't even factor, they don't even come into the account of how things have been solved. How do we work out how to value that? And how do we also move beyond the valuing the super chicken and think about trying to grow super teams and groups and look at some sort of, if we need to count eggs, do something more at that social group level. Allow for the fact that someone may not be your best paper writer, but they're so good at helping the people who are good paper writers, or they're so good at contributing in other ways that make a difference. That means that the other work wouldn't get done if they weren't there. But if we're just counting individual super chickens, they would be regarded as low because they wouldn't have any papers. Let's think about the unit that we evaluate at. And this is, talking to myself as well. Let's rethink our self-presentation. When I looked at sort of the bio on my webpage, it buys into the egg counting agenda. And yet, what I'm about, I don't care about another paper. I am in the luxurious position of having a permanent position, so I know that I'm saying this from a position of privilege. But what has driven me in all my work, whether it was when I was a midwife, when we did private practices, midwifery as midwives, doing the radical thing in Queensland at the time, or working in industry, working in academia, it's always been about mentoring and growing people. That's my red thread. My other red thread is it's always been about the people on the ground, which is why we started a private midwifery practice, because we didn't think women were getting women-centred care. That's why I like being in human-computer interaction, because I care about the human people perspective of technology and that it works for them, in the real world, on the ground. They're my red threads. They're the things I care about. They're my values. That's what I should be presenting myself as. And then there are also ways that we need to acknowledge that even if I do have eggs that can be counted, they're not my eggs. They're the eggs that have been contributed to by so many people. Colleagues that I've worked with, worked closely with, collaborated with, reviewers who I don't know who've given really valuable feedback, volunteers who've given their time to organise a conference or edit the journal. So many ways that so many other people, the chances that I've had to walk into a job at Sussex that had £3 million of funding because someone else had a very tragic death and needed to leave, and I got to take over their group. And a lot of my eggs came from that. I didn't get that funding. So they're not even my eggs, that are sitting there against my name. And then there's all of the gazillion tiny little things that again often get not counted because they're invisible, but they go to creating the constructive, positive work environment for people. And it is around some of these social and emotional skills that, as I said, are learnable, and they can have a huge impact. There's a lot of research evidence to support this. And that's just doing little things in the workplace, like how we listen to one another. Taking 2 seconds to say thank you to someone for doing something in a very specific way, not just general things. Giving people time, just noticing, asking how their weekend was, creating a social environment that people want to be in. Because you're helping, Barbara Fredrickson talks about this as broadening and building our cognition, in creating that sort of positive collaborative environment. And that's where our increased creativity and problem solving comes from. And there's lots of other literature that talks about how the benefits of doing these sorts of things don't just come to the person who's receiving, but the giver also benefits in lots of tangible ways. And the other thing that I find really interesting is that this is contagious. This is where the small actions can have a big impact, not just for the person that you're working with or engaging with, but in this contagion effect. And one study talked about, if you only have 25% of people doing this sort of thing, that's enough to create a culture change. I don't know how replicable that is, but nonetheless, this also repeats stuff from other studies that it's contagious. Give and Take book by Adam Grant is particularly worth looking at. And the other thing that I think is often forgotten is we need to bring our best selves to our work. And we can't do that if we're stressed out, not eating well, not sleeping well, not exercising, not taking time for family and friends, and not doing other things. And again, one of the pressures and stresses in academia is this thing that we should always be doing more. And we can always do more. There's no stopping point. It's a challenge. This is not being selfish. It's selfish not to do this stuff. Because if you're not doing this stuff, you're not bringing your best self to work, you're not doing your best for the problems you have to solve, you're not doing your best by your colleagues. So be selfish. Don't be selfish and look after yourself so that you can... Did I get that mixed up? Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. So, in conclusion, we do have some really big societal challenges that technology is right and centre of. We need everyone. We need us all to be good technical people in whatever that means. But we need to be super colleagues, super collaborators, super groups together in order to deliver on this. And we do have superpowers, amazing superpowers, to help create those environments to deliver on that work. And I just want to end also with my diversity dream. I would love us to decouple these conversations from gender. Yes, a study like that leadership study showed that most of the people who responded, women did better out of X. But at an individual level, they're human skills. So can we just talk about people and humans? And can we talk about us each contributing our best selves and whatever our strengths, our particular strengths are, and that we have processes, procedures, accounting processes that really reflect the true, the value of diversity across all dimensions, not just gender, because there are many other dimensions of diversity that we need included to solve these problems. So thank you.